Right. I'd like to call this this special meeting of the Great Island Advisory Committee to order on June 18th at 6:33 p.m. And this is, we're going to be covering the policy. I'm going to keep my remarks really short, really. I just want to thank Bruce for organizing the Zoom option here. We didn't have one last week because we didn't have staff, but Bruce took time out of his busy life to get up to speed with Jen, so really appreciate that. Our next meeting, it's a regular meeting. It will be with Reed Hildebrand. We'll be going over the master plan, and that's next Wednesday. That'll be a hybrid meeting, and it'll start at 7 o'clock. And then the policy meeting to follow up on this one will be at this point, July 9th. A little ways away, but I'm expecting good turnout, Bruce again running, and a start time probably at 6:30, but we'll firm that up later.
Wait, is that that's next Thursday meeting?
No. Next Wednesday is our meeting. It's on the calendar. And it starts at 7 o'clock, and it's a hybrid, and it'll be going over the master plan with Reed Hildebrand.
And you want me to run that one?
No.
Reed's going to run that.
Reed
okay. Yeah. Good. Okay. All good. Just want to make sure I got my wires straight.
No. So when there's materials present, it's just easier. Okay. Next item is public comment. Do we have anybody that would like to speak? If you would, raise your hand. Okay.
Oh, I see a hand. All right. Hold on. Ask to unmute. William Castell, you should be able to speak.
Okay, hey everybody, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Bruce, how are you, everyone? As I'm getting to know you, I'm a total newbie to the whole political thing in town. I should know better with my mom, right? But how does it work again? Like with this whole thing with all the furniture and like, isn't there like a plan first that comes, then like you figure out tactically how you make that plan successful? I'm missing something. Maybe you could point me to a website or something where I could like read the processing of how the committees operate and like due process, the time frames, public comment, all that stuff that seems to be important. I'm not sure how it operates. I could use some guidance.
Yeah. Okay. This is public comment is normally not a back and forth. So what I would suggest is if you have questions. Yes, if you have questions, send them in an email and we'll get back to you.
Okay, so the most important thing pressing out of last meeting's conversation, specifically is about the security and chaining or how you hammer the stuff down on the ground. Like you're spending $100,000 on furniture, how is it protected? That's a question I want recorded in the public comment. It seems to be kind of a difficult thing to stomach with chains on furniture in a field, but maybe concrete slab pour is the way to go. I just don't understand that. So for the record, that's what I want recorded. Security of assets.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else for public comment?
Okay. Do I see any hands? I don't see any as of now.
I don't see any, Bruce.
I don't see any either. Yeah, you guys are co-hosts, so you guys can see all this too. So I appreciate any help you want to give me.
Yep.
Okay, so seeing no additional, again, thank you everybody for being here. I know we've had a lot of meetings. Last conversation last week, we looked at 12 key policy areas to work on. So tonight we'll be tackling those 11 items. Thank you to Jeff and his team for compiling the event policies that we already have in town so that we were able to compare them, and including Waveney Park. Mike and John are not able to join us this evening, but they did share some of their thoughts with me in advance. So I'll bring those into the conversation as we go. We've heard clearly from the community that people want to maintain the unique character of Great Island, but they're also open to having certain events on the island. So whether that's an art painting class or a nature center class or a fireman's picnic or involving the stables in a house tour or having the depot hold a photo shop for a photo shoot for prom, or a road race, or weddings. We've been asked to consider all of these events, and to hold events on the island, we need to have a policy. So that's why we're working on this now, so that we can address these requests from our committee, or from our community. So now we will start right in on the 11 items that we discussed. So I think maybe starting off with, well, I think one big question that we have to work through is, how do we want to monitor access to the island? Do we want to follow the park, our park plan, which is anybody can drive onto the property? If you're out of town, you live out of town and you want to visit Cherry Lawn, you can visit Cherry Lawn. Or do we want to follow the beach model, which is set up a little bit differently, and you have a beach pass that allows you to enter the parking lot. There is a parking attendant there, and the beach pass is good for the season that you purchase it. There is a different start date. Laura, you can maybe refresh me on when Pear Tree and when weed start. I think it's a couple
Weed
weeks.
starts earlier in April and goes through mid-October. Pear Tree is Memorial Day to Labor Day.
Okay.
And that's because weed is just a much more actively utilized park. There's so many amenities there that people come down to earlier in the season, when tennis lessons and outdoor yoga and things begin, and then go through the fall.
Okay, so I think one thing to consider, and this is, we can talk about it tonight, but I think we might want to have the whole group here to really delve into it, but to think about if we want to have some sort of a model. And I think it really is because we have very limited parking, right? We have 58 non-ADA spots penciled out in the master plan at this time. We have 4 ADA, and then we have another 58 in the overflow. So we have limited parking. So I guess I'd like to hear the committee's thoughts on how to go forward with the access. So, I'm just going to start randomly, because I don't want to ask the same person to start every time. But Laura, you're pretty much an expert on this from the park side. So do you have any thoughts?
I don't know if I'm an expert. I mean, I have to start by saying that I'm a very, very strong proponent of public space and public parks for all. That's just core to my belief. I grew up traveling all over the country, going to national and state and local parks, travel a lot still, and want that. I mean, I think about all of our community members who go to Waveney and enjoy Waveney, or off season may go down to Greenwich Point. That being said, the parking is the restriction. So, my thinking is we need to have some time period when we expect it's going to be most crowded, with some sort of sticker system, whether it's using the beach stickers or a separate sticker, we would have to decide, to control it during peak periods, to assure that, residents can get, priority parking. But then, as we understand the cadence of how the island is used, to be able to open it up more broadly during parts of the year when parking is not as much of a challenge. And again, that just comes from my sort of, core beliefs that, beautiful space should be open to everybody to enjoy, because it's just so important.
Okay. Kip, any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Lori completely. I think while I would love to provide everyone with access, we are limited by the parking. So I would also advocate for a sticker system. I think just, having a refuse sticker and a beach sticker on the car already if there's some way to incorporate it into that existing beach sticker, that would make the most sense. I don't know if that needs to be under Parks and Rec purview to do that, but that would be probably the preference for me. And then I guess just to make clear, are we assuming that everyone can still walk in and have access, whether they're a Darien resident or not? Because I think that's sort of a happy medium if so.
Yeah, I think that we're under that.
Okay.
Jeff?
Well, I think that's a good compromise solution because it certainly would allow people to visit just as we enjoy visiting Waveney and other places. But in the peak season, that's just not much parking. And I think going with the beach model is something that we've already used successfully in 2 properties. So I'd be on board with that.
Yep. One thing we need to think about that I didn't mention though is there's the beach sticker, but then as you know, our beaches are open to anybody and they can come in and purchase a day pass to enter, which is 50, I think it's up to 55. No, I think we increased it now. I don't have it off the top of my head. We did increase it. So we would need to think about that piece as well, whether the purchase of day stickers would be a possibility.
Hey, Lori, how many people do that a year?
Quite a few.
I'm
Quite a
surprised.
few. I'd have to look back and get the numbers. Hold on. I don't know if I can get it for you, tough for my meeting materials for tonight. I know we're off right now so far this season. Keep talking, and if I can get my hands on it, I will.
Okay. Dan, any additional thoughts? Or any thoughts? Sorry.
I guess that I think a sticker system would be appropriate. I think that during peak season, that Darien residents only, and like other parks on off-peak, and you can pick what months those are, that we would allow anybody to enter, to drive in and park. My concern about having non-residents be able to walk in is that there's no place to park because they don't have a sticker to park at Pear Tree Point Beach, so they're going to be on Harbor, and that's, I'm pretty sure, not acceptable.
Okay. Well, right now they can park at Pear Tree. They just need a beach sticker during the summer, right?
Or they would buy a day pass.
Right, or they would buy a day pass. Okay. Mark, any thoughts?
Do, Monica. I like the idea that Darien has its beaches and parks generally open. I understand the parking limitation. I don't see it as much different than the parking limitation we have at Pear Tree and at Weed. Similar to Weed, this property has a lot of other amenities. Weed has a lot of other amenities, and Lori touched on that. And so I lean in favor of something similar to the existing beach sticker regime. We may learn over time we have to adjust the peak period at GI might be different than the peak period at Weed or Pear Tree. But I lean in that direction. So something similar to what we already have, and then not requiring the sticker in the off season or off peak period.
Yeah, I can't get my hands on full year for last year, but for instance, I'm going to use last year's year to date because this year it's not been strong because it's rained every weekend. But at this time last year, early in the season, we had sold 134 day passes. Or thereabouts. So,
Yeah,
which is, a decent amount for, a couple weeks after Memorial Day.
right. And I think, Lori, there's a difference now between during the week and on the weekend. I think the weekend pass is like 74, I feel like.
We bumped it up for the weekends, yeah.
Right, okay. And what I didn't understand is that, and correct me, but I believe if you're a resident and you don't have a beach pass and you want to go on the weekend, you go and you buy the daily pass, but you can't use that. You can't go into town hall and say, I bought this, can I now have a beach? You have to start from scratch.
Yep.
Right? Right.
Yes.
You really don't want to forget to get the beach pass. Okay.
Yeah.
Bruce, any thoughts on this one?
I think it's been pretty well covered, and don't have anything really else to add, but I would be supportive of the sticker during the times that we prescribe.
Okay, me too. Okay. All right, good. That's very helpful. Okay, the next item, we're just going to go through types of events, maximum size, frequency, hours, locations on the island, parking restrictions, shuttle requirements, noise restrictions, eligibility to apply, a deposit or fee, and then alcohol policy. Okay, so there's 11 of them, and we'll try to move along so that we can get as much info from Lori as we can before she has to take off. So, types of events. What kind of events should be allowed? Town run, nonprofit, private rental, Darien residents and Darien-based civic nonprofit groups. Who can reserve the facilities or apply for a permit? So, Jeff, any thoughts?
Well, I'll just preface this by saying it depends, I guess, on whether we have expectations of significant revenue. I'm not hearing that is really a driving force. So I would be in favor of Darien residents and Darien-based civic and other nonprofit organizations.
Okay, and that's what the Park and Rec does, right, Lori?
Yes.
Okay, Lori, any thoughts on this one?
I think that would be a good starting point. I think as Mike correctly pointed out last week, this is sort of opening thinking, and we're going to need to get experience over a few years, and then any and all of it can be reviewed and updated. So I think that's a starting place to really see how heavy the demand is or isn't, and to just get a sense of how the island's really used once we've developed the parking and have real bathrooms and such. I think that's a great starting place that, should be revisited in a few years.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure everybody understands. So we're an advisory committee, so we're going to make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, but the Board of Selectmen will then take a look at this draft and make any changes. And I think that it will be a living document, and we're going to start, but things can be adjusted as time goes on. So, Bruce, any thoughts on types of events and who sponsors?
I think local would be a good place to start.
Okay, so local Darien residents and Darien-based civic and nonprofit groups?
Yes.
Okay. Does anybody have any thoughts, anything you would like to include other than those groups?
I was going to say, when we say civic, are we're talking only about nonprofit? What I'm thinking about are, businesses. The businesses in town are taxpayers in town. They pay property taxes and so we need to be very specific about that. Whether we mean, residents only versus if we use the word taxpayer, that includes a broader group. So if we say civic organizations, just kind of what does that mean? The devil will be on the details on that one.
Yeah, I think civic is, when I think of it as like the police department or the fire department.
Is it person to person? Is it
Yeah,
nonprofit?
nonprofit.
When we write it, we're going to need to be specific.
Okay, I think this is actually language pulled from Park and Rec.
Right.
So, but yes, I don't anticipate this being businesses. Does anybody at this time? Okay, so very.
Monica, I'm not suggesting businesses, but I'm not, to Lori's point, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not exactly sure what the definition of civic is necessarily. I'm just looking for the words here.
Okay.
Like I'm wondering, like the YMCA or their staff. I don't, things like that. I don't know. Is that civic? Is that commercial? I don't know. So to your point, Lori, I think we want to be pretty clear on the definitions here.
And it doesn't mean our rules couldn't be written better, just saying.
Right.
And we-
No,
No, I'm saying, it was, and as we know.
yeah, not questioning,
Really,
but
what happens is things come up is the office will get inquiries and they'll say, the way this is written, I'm not sure. And so that's why
Yep.
sometimes we have to fine tune things.
yeah, so that might be something we need some guidance from council on, Monica, but the concept is,
But we will get that question most likely. I mean, if some law firm decides that they want to have their office picnic at Great Island and they pay taxes in Darien, they're domiciled here, then we have to think about that.
right. Or is the path on that example, Bruce, a resident who works there sponsor?
Yeah.
Right. Same thing with the Y.
I think you'd be probably hard pressed to find a Darien business that doesn't have a Darien.
Right. So that might be the
Resident.
path, but we got to be clear on that. If that's the path.
Yeah.
And Mike, I don't know if this is the right time, but I do want to address something I think Jeff mentioned about there not being much focus on revenue, and I agree with that statement. But I do believe that any activities we're contemplating should be neutral from a cost perspective. If it's going to create a maintenance item or an operating cost item, just my personal opinion, I don't think that lack of demand for revenue, I don't think transcends over to a tolerance for absorbing costs that anything that we talk about might create.
Okay, we are going to cover deposits and fees. So,
Yep.
Hey, Monica, one last thing I would caution against is somebody from Stanford finding a Darien resident to sponsor them. This is done with weddings all the time at country clubs and stuff. And where the gathering or the group is actually from another town, but they found somebody in Darien to fill out the paperwork and sign off on it. I don't know how we handle that.
that's a good question, because I think the resident is a good, we have resident and we have taxpayer, and we use those terms separately. So I think resident covers us as far as businesses go, but wedding is a good example. I think that Park and Rec, if you want to rent the paddle hut, for instance, you need to be a Darien resident, and you can obviously have non-Darien residents as your guests, but you as the person filling out the paperwork, you have to be on the site, right?
Yes.
And but a wedding, it's what's a Darien resident? Is it the bride? Is it the groom? Is it both? Is it the parents? Is it the grandparents? That I'm not sure on that one. I think I would go with grandparents, parents, or bride and groom, or either one. But let's talk about that, because that is in this category. So in a wedding, because that is a little bit different, but than these other civic and nonprofit, for a wedding, who can apply to hold a wedding at Great Island?
I think that for the trial period, and I don't know even what the definition of trial period is, but until we find out what the demand is, I think we limit it to bridegroom, parents, or grandparents maybe. And that would be it.
Maybe sibling too. I mean, a lot of these young people that are getting married, they don't, they may still live in New York City or some other city. And so it's probably, definitely you're going to need parents, grandparents, but it could be a brother or sister too, that is, the older brother or sister has moved here, their family grew up. You just never really know. I mean, they could be new to town, and the sister or brother lives here, and they hear about this as a great place. So it's, I would probably include brother or sister, but I don't know, maybe that's making it too broad.
Yeah,
I think the other one though, just to add on to that, is that we're going to limit the number of events anyway. It's not like there's going to be a lot of these. wedding size events that we would allow if we follow the model that most of the other people that host weddings on sites like this, they
Right.
typically limit them.
Yep, and that'll be, that's our next item on this. But I think going to, we will have a limited number of events. So I don't know. I kind of like the grandparent, parent, and bride and groom, or bride and groom. I think that's maybe initially trying to keep it a number that we can handle as far as requests go. I'm kind of leaning that way. Jeff?
Well, I thought about siblings too, but that does open the door a little bit wider. And I guess if a brother or sister lives here and everybody else is far flung, it does seem like it could add. I don't know that people would really be think it was unfair to do just those direct, line of descent, parent, grandparent, thankfully, and bride and groom.
Any thoughts from anyone else on this one?
I just don't understand how are we proving any of that?
Yeah, DNA test.
Honestly, I don't. If you could tell me how we prove it, I would sign up for that. But I just don't know how we would limit it.
Well, and then there's also just, we go down the proof path, and then you can go down the extenuating circumstances path of that. It's, if we say no brother or sister, but then there's like someone who's like a 4-generation Darien family, right? And then the parents are deceased, the grandparents are deceased, and they have one living sibling that lives in town, and they went to Darien High School. They lived here for 20 years, and I don't know, it's their kid, but you're going to hear a really compelling story. I'm sure we'll hear very compelling stories of why someone is very worthy of having an acceptance of their application or their request. So it's going to be hard to get this one right, I guess, is all I'm saying. It's going to be hard.
Well, Kip, to your question, wouldn't we just, if we're keeping the opportunities to people that live in town, or their parents live in town, or their grandparents live in town, we can attach an address to any one of those people, right?
Yeah, I think I more meant the relationship.
Well, I guess I'm just naive, and I just believe people would be truthful.
I
Right?
agree with that, Monica. I don't, the sponsor is going to be one of our neighbors, one of our residents.
Yeah.
I take the example that's been made here, but
Okay.
I will comment, though, I don't like delineating about which family members can and can't. I would lean in favor of siblings. Family's family. I don't like to delineate. That's just one guy's opinion.
Well, and then the other thing comes down to just accountability, right? So if, as far as somebody signing up for somebody else, if there's going to be a security deposit or something like that associated with it, that security deposit may have to be drafted from the applicant, and that if there's a problem with breaking rules that we have set. But I know in the club environment, if you introduce a friend or somebody to the club, it's on a first of all, it's on a secondary basis. Usually it's the date. You can't usually sign up as early for a date as like a member of the club might be able to. And then if there's something available, then yes, they'll do that. So anyway, you could do something with the monetary side of it, saying a security deposit is going to be held over you, and of course your good name, that if you go and sponsor somebody for having a wedding or some other event on Great Island and it becomes a problem, then it's your good name in this small town that we live in that is being, it happened on your watch.
Right. Okay, I want to keep moving along. So I think the only sticky point we have here is if we allow siblings to host a wedding for their non-resident sibling, correct? Okay, so let's circle back on this one once we figure out the number of events, because that might have an impact. Okay. Maximum size, how many attendees are appropriate for the site? So right now, permits are required for gatherings of 20 or more at our parks and recs, right? And staff can use discretion on the event size depending on the park and facility, right, Lori?
Yes.
Okay. So this one, I think I did get a little bit of information from Mike that I'll share. He was thinking that 0 to 19 people, you are welcome to get your group together and you do not require a permit. 20 to 50 people is kind of in that small group or medium group, right? And then 50 or more would be a larger group. And I think there's some interest in having restrictions on the 50 or more, perhaps for the summer months, one a month from May to October. And on the 20 to 50, keeping it to perhaps one a week, one on the weekend, and keeping an hour restriction on that, maybe 4 hours. So I'll put that out there for to start the discussion. Dan, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think the issue that people need to consider at 0 to 19, you don't get to reserve a location unless you file for a permit. So if you want to reserve a location and you're less than 20, you can still file in order to reserve a spot. Otherwise, it's a free for all, and you go where space is available at that time that you show up. So for 20 or more, of course, that you have to file, and they'll get a location because they're going to say where they want to hold their event.
Okay, that's a good point. So Dan, are you saying that you have the option 0 to 19 to file to apply for a permit, and that will give you the opportunity, but you don't have to?
I would think so. If you're 15 people and you want to have it on the beach, you probably want to file in order to make sure that you get approval to reserve the beach spot.
Okay. Okay, what's everybody's thinking on the 20 to 50 being a medium group and the 50 over being a larger group? And the larger group would be, obviously, we would have more restrictions on how many number of events we had a year. Lori?
So you said the larger group, you would say once a month in the summer?
Yeah, maybe 6 times a year.
Kind of seems a little skimpy to me. Again, there's a lot of space on the property. I think back, Dan, you were there. We were at Weed Beach last Wednesday night for the Darien Men's Association picnic, and there were 175 people, and we really didn't take up a lot of space in the park. So, I mean, I think that there's enough space that people could be accommodated on a more frequent basis, especially if we're including, school groups coming and doing hikes or things during the day. That's pretty limited.
I like the phrase that staff may use discretion on event size and frequency. I mean, let's just use our heads as the requests come in, just for the reasons that Lori was saying.
Yeah, I mean, do we want a 500-person event every day or every week, probably not, but 50 people are on the property, really, again, just visualizing, you know, other events I've seen at the parks and participated in, it can be in a fairly condensed amount of space if it's a group picnic or something like that.
Well, we also have to remember that there's no buildings right now that they can utilize. So it's going to be like a fairly expensive operation for a larger event, whether 50+ event. If you decide to do one at Great Island, we're going to require shuttling your people in and out because of limited or no parking. If there's, let's say it's a 200-person wedding the third weekend of September. You're going to have to bring your own dance floor, your own tent, your own porta potty trailer, your own generator, your own cook tent, your own everything, BYOE, right? And I mean, and that's going to be for the foreseeable future, because we're just basically gonna, receive the master plan, and then it's not
Right.
the
They'll
main
be
house isn't
all
opening
outdoors.
anytime
Yep.
soon.
So Lori, what I'm hearing is that you think we should bump the 6 up?
I think there should be more flexibility, because as I said, if it's a 50-person event and people want to come for a few hours and have a picnic, that's not, down on the polo field or something, or on the back lawn behind it. That's not a hugely intensive use. And I think then to have nobody else be able to have anything for a whole month, we're really not offering the public too much at that point. I mean, if it's one a month, then that's, one in June, one in July, one in August. It's really not giving the public much usage.
Okay. Mark?
I agree with Lori. We're not really distinguishing between the example that Bruce made of a dance floor and a band and the bar, or I didn't say bar, sorry, but and a picnic of, say, a volunteer fireman or Explorer Post 53. I don't see those as equal. Something that has music and going into the night versus a gathering during the day. So envisioning the diversity of the events we're likely to see, 6 seems skimpy, especially when most, or what, in my opinion, or my observation of what take place in the parks right now are more of those civic type of things and those community type of things and those community group type of things. Not to say there won't be more festive type of events. So I don't know how we distinguish, but 6 seems skimpy when you factor in some of those more placid events.
Well, and if history is any example, I mean, the fire departments and the police have had their picnic down on that island for as long as I can remember.
So there's 2.
We don't get, complaints, and they've treated it very respectfully and everything for years. So, and I think that's like 2 or 3 in the same month. It's usually in the, I think, July or August time frame.
Yeah, they
That
do.
perspective is helpful, Bruce.
Yeah, I talked to Ned. They do one in the spring and one in the fall. So, you know what, Lori, I think when I took a look at all of the requests that we've had so far, actually off the top of my head, there were like 6 or 7 that were kind of in that over, definitely over 50 people. So maybe we look at that number and adjust that number.
Yeah.
How do we feel about a maximum number for the island? Of course, parking is an issue, but I think once we get to these larger events, the shuttle will be the way to go. So is there a cap that we feel we should have? Is there a cap, Lori, for Park and Rec?
No.
No.
Now, again, it's the discretion of the staff and knowing what a particular parcel, what they feel can handle. Again, taking account parking, time of year, what else is going on. What the amount of people they might allow at Weed Beach in late September, early October is going to be very different from we get sometimes requests for the middle of the summer. I mean, we had a request earlier this year. People were doing something in the Rotary Yacht Club and they wanted to do their overflow parking at Weed Beach on a Friday night, and we were like, we can't do that in season for quite, a considerable amount of spaces. Had it been a September request, we probably would have been, yeah, that'll work. So the staff really has to, think of the whole request, the number of people, the time of the event. So that's why it's kind of hard to just put it all in a box as opposed to just looking at kind of the entirety of the request. And we have to think about too, if there might be community events, back when we were talking about the polo event, you could see that might have been 1,000 people or more.
Yeah. I think the polo event is, let's think about this. That was an event where the whole town would be invited. So I think of these larger events, and I also, it's not just the physical footprint, right, of the event. It's the setup before, it's the tear down after, and it's the impact on people that want to use the island just as they're using it today, right? Just for a walk. So, we need to balance both of those groups. And I think we have a lot of places for our residents to have events, right? So it's not as if Great Island is the only option. So, any other thoughts on this one?
I think you did say 4 hours. I think to Bruce's point, if you're bringing everything in and doing it yourself, I think there needs to be consideration for that setup and takedown time. So maybe define the 4 hours as the period when there's attendance to the event. But I would imagine a wedding party might want access prior to that for photos or whatever else. So I think weddings might be a different beast, but that's probably something we want to consider.
Yeah, I think weddings, but when we think wedding, I think engagement party or anniversary party or bat mitzvah, any of these things could be kind of in that same venue, right? So it's not just weddings. Okay, so let's.
Is there a way, Monica, we can, because it's hard to lump everything into one category. Maybe if somehow we could bifurcate this for things like weddings, yes, it could be a bar mitzvah or whatever, but where it's really, a tent, a caterer, rented, really when there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be bring in, and maybe we define those in one category and say no more than X a year, but then what I call the less intensive, that, is just doesn't require so much setup and so much permanency. Maybe we do those separately, but maybe these really, more elaborate events, we have to handle like a separate path. I don't know if that makes sense to people or not, but to me, just all of the involvement. Then when you're talking about, bands and everything else that's involved should be thought about differently. I'm going to keep going back to this men's association picnic, but 175 people, but, Valvolis catered it. They came in, they brought in grills, rented tables and chairs, set up easy peasy. And I think everything was out of there, Dan, by what? 8 o'clock or something? There's no music, no nothing, just, a bunch of rented tables, chairs. They bring in, grill the food, everything was else. Everybody's in and out, no fuss, no muss. To me, I see something like that is different than something very elaborate with all of the extra infrastructure that you would see for a very fancy wedding. Or so maybe trying to lump those together makes it too complicated, because there I could say, okay, let's have less per year. But when you get in the fireman's picnic, a DMA picnic, a school, nursery school end of year, then I think then we're limiting it. That makes sense.
Well, yeah, but what we're limiting, what you're talking about right there, there is kind of a natural limit, and it's timing, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that's where we focus, is events that are in the evening have different restrictions.
That could be a way to think about it too. Yeah.
Or maybe perhaps certain activities, a band, a DJ, things of that sort, be delineators. I just kind of reaching here, but trying to think things that are different from those picnics that Lori was describing.
Amplified,
Right,
amplified sound. Yeah.
Amplified sound. That's a good way to put it. Dance floor.
Okay, so maybe we look at events and create a list of things that would require us looking at it a little differently.
Maybe. I think otherwise I feel like we're getting really tangled up for things that, I'm just thinking of like one of the local schools wants to bring a bunch of kids on a nature walk and then have lunch there or something, Norotan Presbyterian Nursery School at the end of the year and do a nature hike and lunch, and that's 50 kids. I wouldn't want to say, if they do that, then nobody else can do anything on the property for a month. To me, that's different than what I'm kind of calling more these high intensity events.
Okay, maybe we look at adjusting the 50 person and move that up so that we could have more events with the 20. Maybe we say 20 to 75. We allow 2 per month, and one of those can be on a weekend. Just throwing that out there.
I think we don't have any experience yet, and I think that the two people, I think Lori and somebody else, that said that there should be some subjectivity so that we can figure this out. I think some people would, argue that that's going to make it a free for all. I don't think that's the case. I think we have a pretty good track record of understanding from our other properties in town what is appropriate and what if one event is right on the heels of another event and it's big, then you could say no to that. And then I think that based on the experience that we find, it will have lessons learned and say, okay, we need to say 1 a month, or we need to say no events in between Memorial Day and Labor Day, but you could have, 3 larger events in the spring and 3 larger events in the fall, or, but something like that. But I think time will tell us. And I agree with what I heard earlier, that we don't want to basically legislate this so tightly that we're feeling like, oh, we can't say yes to this because we made these rules. But it sounds fairly reasonable what they're asking, and why did we make this rule that was so tight?
But the flip side is, if we don't make some rules, we can't say yes to anything.
We can't say yes to any. Well, we can't say yes to everything. Is that what you mean?
If we're going to say yes to one thing, then how do we not say yes to everything? We need to have a policy. We do need to come up with these answers.
I gotta go. Sorry, I didn't realize how late it was.
Wow. Okay. Thanks, Laura.
I gotta be at my own meeting in 9 minutes, so I gotta run.
I agree. It's kind of a catch-22. I don't have an answer for that.
Well, the size of events and the frequency,
I guess the only thing I would say is that who was it, Dan or Lori or somebody that brought it up originally, said that's how Parks and Rec has it written into theirs, that they have subjectivity in approval of events based on their reading of the use of the property. They are the subject matter expert on their properties. They know that they're going to have heavy use over 4th of July. So if somebody comes in and wants to do a wedding at Weed Beach on the 4th of July, they're probably going to get their application denied, because the subjectivity of the Parks and Rec staff say, we think that's a recipe for disaster. And so the answer is no. And so I think that, if it's working in another department in town, I don't see why it shouldn't work for us if we try to mimic some of those approvals procedures.
Okay, well, Highland requires a permit for 100-person or more, and Park and Rec requires a permit for 20 people or more. So there's a pretty big difference there, but those properties serve different functions, right? And this won't be run by Park and Rec, and the person that will be looking into any exemptions or exceptions is going to be, town staff. So the more direction we can give them, the better. Could we, okay. Any idea?
I think maybe going up to 75 or even 100 for the small event. Because I thought the example of, the pre-K and some parents and whatnot, those are not the same thing as a 250-person wedding. So I wouldn't necessarily want to take, if we're only going to have 6 big events, and I think Highland has provision for 8. So I think 6 to 8 sounds pretty good for whatever we define as big. So I'd just throw out maybe 75 or 100.
Okay, so no permit unless, as Dan pointed out, you wanted to
Oh,
reserve.
well, I'm not, you still need the permit. I'm just saying if we want it to count against our maximum of large events, I'd raise the ceiling a little bit from 50.
Okay, so no permit for 0 to 19. You need a permit for 20 to 100, and we'll figure out how many of those we think on a weekly basis. And then any event over 100 is considered a large event. Does
I
that
think
make,
that would be, I think you could fit a lot in to that.
how does that sound to people?
I would agree. That's a good number.
Okay. Now let's go with the big one. How many 100-person events would you think is a good number for the property for the year? Anybody? Dan, Jeff, do you think 8?
Well, I just, that's what it says for Highland Farm. And I don't know, 6 to 10, it would seem to me. I mean, I'm appreciative of the fact that there may be a couple of events that people would like to do in September and October that wouldn't be as big a demand time. And so maybe having a little shoulder season allowance for that. So I'll say 8. That if we had 7 of those events park system wide, it would be hard for me to imagine, that we'd be deluged with turning people down with a number of 8.
I think we could definitely support 8. I think, let's say you did 4 just look at the shoulder seasons alone, where if, let's say you had 2 weddings in May, 2 weddings in June, that's every other weekend, essentially, for 4 weddings before the summers even started. And let's say you had, and they're not, as Monica said, they might not be weddings. They could be all sorts of different types of events that are essentially family style celebrations, fairly large. So, but let's say you had 4 after Labor Day. The weather's good right through October. That's prime wedding season, event season for, all those types of events. And then what I would say is we could easily support that. And then, but if we limit it to like 8 or something, you say, okay, well then the fireman's picnic and the policeman's picnic, those are over 100 events. Are those counting against if we limit it to 8? Or, I think we have no experience. We're sitting here trying to make rules up against something that we just don't know a whole lot about. We have neighboring properties like Weed Beach and Highland Farm and things like that. But I hear what you're saying, Monica. We have to do something. We can't just have no rules. But I think 8 might be a little low, especially if you're going to include police and fire picnics and the men's association, senior men's. If there's 120 people there, it's a very low intensity event essentially, but it still tips the scales of large events. So you just chewed up another one. So I would go a little higher.
Okay. Dan, any thoughts?
There's going to be a lot of judgment calls besides you're number 4, therefore you still fit within the qualification. And you talk about these decisions are going to be made by town staff that or by, I don't even know by who. I guess this gets a little bit into the governance thing. If somebody's got to run the island and make these decisions on down the road, and it can't just be the Board of Selectmen choosing which events can go and not go. But I hope we're considering guidelines tonight, not establishing fixed rules that can just be plugged into a computer and it works or it doesn't work by the numbers we've chosen. And we're not finalizing tonight
No.
our recommendation to the Board of Selectmen or anything. I get to see, we're doing a lot of talking back and forth, and I'm not sure what the final numbers are and sizes and all that stuff. So I hope we get another opportunity to look at all this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I'm trying to narrow down what we're going to look at in the future, because we have all kinds of items to look at. This happens to be probably one of the largest, but as far as issues to address. So
I think they're good starting points.
I like the word guidelines, Dan. I think based on where we're at, I think guidelines is a good word.
Mark?
We're coming up with guidelines, but having an entity, a governance here, like the infrastructure that Parks and Rec has, that will accumulate knowledge specific to the site as far as impact, ecological impact, and impact on the neighbors, and what the infrastructure can support in its current form and what it can support over time as that infrastructure evolves. It's going to be subjective. I think having some high level guidelines is great, but not all 100-person events are equal, as I mentioned earlier. And so we're going to need some governance here, an entity of staff. I know we referred to staff, but to me, it almost feels like the type of infrastructure that Parks and Rec has, governing similar properties. So I don't know who it was to mention governance, but we're going to need an infrastructure in place to deal with the subjectivity of all the different things we're going to see. And as we learn, or as the town learns, what the impact is on the island for different types of events, some will end up being more restricted than others. So coming up with some high level guidelines, sure. The larger events, we're going to want to limit the number. But I think as part of that, the governance, what is this staff entity going to look like? That's going to make these decisions.
That's a great point. But again, we were asked, the Nature Center asked to have a class this summer, and we just saw another wedding request, and we have turned down other groups. So I think maybe what Lori was saying is really, these nighttime events or these more party events, maybe we look at those separate than our not-for-profit or our civic, however we define it. Maybe we separate those two so that at least some of these we can start to address, right? I think the wedding thing, the reality is most people are not going to be requesting a wedding for 2 months from now, right? They've already made their decisions on where they are going. But these other categories, the road race or the nature center, things like that, it would be good if we could move on. So, okay, so let me give some thought. And give some thought on how we can separate these two so that at least some of these events we can narrow down.
Agreed.
Okay.
I think that just for community impacts, nighttime and amplified sound is a pretty easy category to split off.
Yep. That's sort of where I was coming down. That might be when we're talking about limiting 6 or 8 a year. I don't know what the right number is. That's what comes to mind. Having 6 different kids groups go through bird watching and wildlife spotting drills or exercises. Right? I just think we'd be a lot more lenient on something like that.
Yeah, and when you go to like the fireman's picnic or whatever, those are daytime events, you know.
Yep.
So they may have amplified sound, but I don't know, it's when I've seen it, it's not so much like blasting as it is background music, you know, where people are hanging out. It's not cranked up with a dance floor.
Okay. All right, let's talk about parking and parking restrictions. We have a limited number of spaces. So for events that we determine are large, regardless of the time of day, do we, how do we feel about shuttle service, or do we allow a certain percentage of the parking that we have be allocated to these events? Anybody?
I think if we're being realistic, we're not likely to have parking for this summer or next summer. So I think every event that we even talk about for the next 2 summers and through the winter is shuttle. I'll start there.
Okay.
Well, Dan, I see where you're coming from. Something on the shoulder periods, fall, spring. We do have 58 spaces there, which could easily be 100 people on a weekend. I wouldn't. When I think about all the events we just mentioned, all the diverse ones, set aside wedding or family celebration, that's going to eliminate youth groups. That's going to eliminate almost the firemen, probably, if they have to start shuttling. Oh, yeah, they might have a vehicle, but that's going to eliminate a lot of those more benign events we were talking about. I guess the children could be bussed in, but they have to charter a bus because they can't use the Board of Ed buses. I'm just thinking out loud here. I apologize.
Where do we have 58 spaces?
Oh, that's right. Well, next year. You're right. Right now we don't. So everyone's being.
I think it's Dan. I think what Dan's saying is I think it's safe to say until further notice.
Yeah, until further notice. Yep.
Until further notice, any event of 100 people or more is going to require shuttle service approved by the approvers.
Yeah, I guess interim I don't know if that's the right number, but I get it. Right now,
I don't know that it's the right number either.
Yeah, but
you know,
that concept,
it's somewhere around there, because I think most of the policies that I've seen from neighboring properties that are similar to Great Island have items in the rules that say that the property will remain open for the public during the other event and is not to be a big disturbance to the general use of the property as it is normally used by the residents or the community. So if you had a 50-person picnic at daytime on the polo field that we approved, then we don't want all of our parking being taken up by that event. And then people, you know, a mom comes over to walk her kids in a stroller and she's driving through the parking lot and she can't find a parking spot. And so that's our fault at that point, you know.
And that could be either during this interim period where they're parking in Pear Tree, or when there is parking a year and a half, 2 years from now, when they're tying up the 58 spaces.
Yeah, and I think that, if that's gonna happen on a Saturday or something like that, then town hall's closed and we can make parking available at town hall and then they can shuttle from there or something.
Well,
So
you
th-
guys, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, this comes back to Lori's point about discretion that Parks and Rec has. An event on a Saturday may be unacceptable, but may be acceptable the other about 5 weekdays of that same week. You pointed to your example, Bruce, with the lady coming with the stroller and all the spaces are tied up. Not every day is equal. So what we're mapping out here, we're not even touching on days, which days. And so there's going to be subjectivity.
Well, and then the question is just how different of a property is Great Island than all the other properties that we have in Darien and that are available in places either in or around Darien, whether they're clubs or this or that. So we have no idea what the demand is going to be.
Yep.
We really don't. So, I mean, here, I think we're fearing that it's going to be very strong, and it may be at the beginning and it may be forever. I don't know, but we don't know.
I think that the events that I read out, I think that if they were successful, and I think they would be successful, I think that they will be repeat events, right? Those groups will want to do that on an annual basis. So, but going back to what Dan said, let's break this out into time frame. So we know work is happening on 23A. We know that work is going to continue until, let's say, next spring or early summer. So between now and then, there is no parking. So shuttle service only, correct? Right, that's an easy one. Do we want to have events on the island? Obviously, we have no lights, so night events would be not possible right now, but are we okay holding events during the day? I see Jeff is nodding. Any thoughts? Dan, any thoughts?
I think that, yes, we should allow certainly smaller events, at least, from this summer. While we're, as long as the road is open, which is only gonna be weekends, really.
And after 4 o'clock on weekdays, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
after 4 on
Yeah,
weekdays.
so it's pretty limiting for the next 9 months at least.
But I don't see any reason why we would restrict that if it works out for the people who want to hold the events.
Right, they obviously we would explain, there's major construction going on. So we would look to hold smaller events during this construction time. And we would require shuttle service, obviously.
By
Yeah.
smaller, is that less than 100? Is that what we're thinking, Monica? By smaller, it's not the large category.
Yeah, I think less than 100, but I'm open to hearing your thoughts.
Yeah, no, I wasn't necessarily locking into the 100, but that range of delineating between large and small, wherever we settle on that, would be.
I don't know that you're going to find somebody, like you said, Monica, people plan weddings way in advance.
Yeah.
So it's like, if we say, okay, if somebody wants to have a wedding in September or October down at Great Island, and bus their people in and out, that's probably possible, because 23A construction, if I read it right, they have to have a 12-foot wide passable lane that a fire truck could get through. So if a fire truck could get through, a school bus could get through too. And obviously it would be after 4, it wouldn't be while they're working, right? It would be, they've closed it down and secured it for, like in a worst case scenario, if they were the sewer and the stuff that doesn't come in that way. So it's not like they're going to have the road so dug up that there's going to be steel plates in it and things like that because of sewer pipes and stuff underneath it.
No,
But
it needs to be safely accessible.
But if somebody wanted to have, let's say somebody wanted to have an anniversary party for their whatever anniversary, and they wanted to have 150 people, and they wanted to put up a tent, and that was going to be, and they were all excited about it. Is there a good reason for us to say no to that? If they want to do that on September 25th, which is a Saturday from 5 to 10 as a test balloon of a larger event that we would be kind of like the ones we're talking about. The question is just when do we allow it to start? And we could definitely say, well, it's not, I mean, I'm probably okay with saying it's fine not to start them until after 23A is done, but I don't know.
I think someplace in here we're talking about hours.
Yeah,
I mean, if I throw out there and you guys can complain about it, I'm thinking events should take place dawn to dusk for the first year or whatever until we get more, info on how these things are going. And we haven't done anything to develop the island, so I don't know why we want people out there after dusk. It's unsafe getting off the island in the dark, and so there's nothing safe about it, certainly.
yeah, yeah. This is one I asked, this one I did talk to John a little bit about, and that was his feeling also. And there's no lighting, and we're not set up for events after darkness.
I agree with that.
What kind of lighting is in Waveney? Are there streetlights from 124 into Waveney House?
I don't know.
I think we should look at that because that's a good test balloon. Like, I mean, I'm not a proponent of putting streetlights in on Great Island anyway, really. That is, I think we want to do minimal, and that if I don't think that, I hope we don't have an expectation that there's going to be, a streetlight every, few hundred yards along the pathway from the entrance all the way to the main house, because I think that I don't think that's the case at Waveney, and I think that people, whether they're driving their own car or they're in a shuttle coming from some other place, vehicles have very bright lights that can safely get in and out of that property, and then there would be plenty of lighting wherever the event would be. So I'm not saying that I'm saying we should do it sooner, but I'm just saying I don't think that lighting in 6 to 12 months hopefully isn't going to be changed a whole lot from the way it is today. So if that's what's holding us back from allowing events, I think we should think hard about that. And I think we should definitely think hard about any permanent lighting that we put in, and obviously we will.
Obviously. Okay. So where did we land on events between now and when 23A is completed? Are we allowing them? Are the 6 of us in favor of allowing events of less than 100 on the property before 23A is completed? Dan, you are not.
I thought I was the one that said yes.
Oh, you said yes. I'm sorry. Okay. Yes, but not, I'm sorry. Yes, but dawn to dusk.
Correct.
Jeff, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think dawn to dusk, less than 100, and we can recalibrate if we run into some problems. But we know there are some ones that, just based on our discussion, seem like they'd be good fits, and why not see how they work?
Okay. Kip,
Yes, in favor of that.
Mark,
Yes, with the limitation dawn to dusk, and we got to have the proviso can access safely. This road's going to be under construction. I mean, that goes without saying, but I said it.
okay. Bruce?
I think that's a good guideline. Yes.
Okay, I do too. I think it's a good place to start, you know? And that's what we're saying is we're going to learn. So, okay. And that's an easy one because shuttle is required. So we have the timing there. Do we have any thoughts on how long those events can go? Is there like, do we have a 4 hour on it or no limit?
Why do we need to limit it? Just because to free it up?
Yeah. Yep, exactly. And we don't have to. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I mean, again, if they're just guidelines, say 5 hours, you know, it goes from noon to 5 p.m. And it's the Girl Scouts having a picnic, you know, 2 troops or something. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, they get there, they start setting up, people start arriving, they have their event, they leave, it's cleaned up. They got a 5 hour window.
That's, well, that's what I was thinking, Bruce. I don't know if 4 or 5 hours for the attendance portion is the right. That's, you know, we'll let the group talk about that, but cleanup and removal, setup and removal of anything that's brought in same day is what I'm thinking for this early stage, small event type thing. All the examples you cited there, you would think folks who bring their stuff in, set up, and clean it out same day. No floors being installed or tents or porta potties
Okay,
overnight anyway.
okay. And the 5 hours includes setup and tear down?
No, I was thinking the attendance 4 to 5 hours and
Okay,
same day in and out as far as setup and removal and cleanup. Everything brought in has to be removed, including garbage. I think we cover that somewhere else. But
Yeah.
nothing can be left behind.
okay. Anybody have any thoughts on that? 5 hours for attendance and setup and tear down happens same day. Okay. These are events for 100 person or less during this early or 23A work. Okay, all right, we got somewhere on that. So how many of those do you think we should allow between now and when 23A is done? Should we have, remember, we'll have access on the weekends and at 4 o'clock. So 4 o'clock, if an event is 5 hours, that's 9 o'clock. That's, we're sticking with dusk, so it won't be, that long. Do we want to limit the number per weekend? Kip?
Yeah, I would say no more, I mean, no more than one a day. And if we start seeing them one a day, I think we'll need to tighten it up because that's going to be too many. But again, like I think it was Kip or somebody else that said, if we lock this down or it was Lori, she said, you know, if you say once a month or whatever, then it's like you had it. And then, I would say if it's only Saturday and Sunday, maybe we say one a weekend. I don't know, one a weekend. So it's, if there's one Saturday, there's not one Sunday. One per week.
I mean, some of these events are going to be, or I'm guessing maybe most of them will be 20, 25, 30 people. Those people are just going to disappear into the island. I just wish people who are making the decisions could use some judgment on that.
Yeah, that's a good call. I'm sorry. My logic was flawed on that. I was thinking 100 people, like up to, because we said up to 100. And I was thinking that they were all going to be 100. Yeah, that's a very good point, Dan.
So,
Yeah, so maybe it's a 2 or 3 per weekend, so you're not limiting it to one one per day. You could have 2 on a single day, but you're limiting the overall weekend amount.
Maybe that's the 100.
Yeah, I think a cumulative might be good.
Yeah, 100 or 425 or 333s or I don't know. Getting too complicated here, but
Well, we already said no to the 100 plus, right? For
right
this
now, no
time
100
period.
plus.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't say no to it. We said that the guidelines were.
Yeah, right,
no,
right.
I think that we're basically talking about guidelines.
And for the period, Monica
This-
described it, the 23A construction period. I actually
Right.
wonder, should we define it up until the infrastructure on the island changes? There's nothing, the road 23A may be done, whether it's September or March, April next year. Then what? Nothing's changed on the island except the road is wide. So
Well-
maybe this is for that period until the flow pattern starts to be implemented.
Well, to me, that was the widening is for proper emergency access for larger crowds, right? So that would change something in my mind to allow those larger events if they're being shuttled in.
That's a good point. Good point.
Could you just clarify that again, Kip? It would change something in your mind. The shuttle is a controlled environment, is what you're saying?
Well, the differentiating factor before and after 23A is that it's being widened to create the proper emergency vehicle access for presumably larger crowds, right? So then that would validate having larger crowds on the island. And if they're being shuttled in, I don't see any necessary additional infrastructure to approve those.
Right.
But I think this gives us, I think if we focus on between now and when 23 is done, at least it gives us a chance to try a few things and see if they work. Right?
Exactly.
Yep.
And it hasn't been said, but any of these guidelines will be put before the PD and the fire department as far as that whole safety topic Kip just mentioned.
Right, definitely.
Yeah, we're not arbitrating that.
Okay, so going back to the how many per 100-person max for the weekend, and we could have more than one event on a day if it's under that threshold. Is that right? Is that what you're thinking?
I think so. Obviously, again, we get back to the discretion, but if somebody wants to do something in the stables courtyard and somebody else wants to do something on the estate house lawn, those aren't going to really interfere with each other, and other people can still walk and enjoy quietude. So I think, yeah, that the cumulative makes sense to me, 100 per weekend.
Okay. So 100 a weekend or 100 for the week?
Well, it's a moot point because, maybe it doesn't get dark till 8:30 at night on a weekday. So you could theoretically have someone go in there from 4 to 8 June, at the end of June next week, right? Let's say.
They'll start getting short quick.
Yeah, but so I mean, again, we're not going to know how it's going to play out, but I would say I think the numbers like 100. You're saying 100, but again, if somebody comes in and fills out the application and says it's 60 people, and another person comes in and says it's 60 people, and you're like, well, it's 120, so the second person is a no. So that's where I'm just hoping these are guidelines and there's subjectivity like there is in Parks and Rec, because you could look at the impact on that, and it's a bird watching group that's coming in and having lemonade and cookies on the main house front lawn. That's insanely low impact. They're coming in a school bus, and we're now going to say no to it because it's over the 100 threshold. So I'm just hoping that we're all being very serious about these guidelines, and that they are, but I would say that the 100 is probably on the low side. Maybe more like a 150 would give you some flexibility to say, okay, there could be a low impact item, and then there could be a picnic of 75 people, and they both happen on the same weekend, and we're probably not overtaxing the property at that point. I mean, time will tell.
Remember that even during the summer, after the hour of 4 o'clock until evening, traffic's gonna be light because there's still no place to park for people. So you're gonna get the joggers, you're gonna get the aggressive walkers that go through, but what's that going to be? 25 people after 7 o'clock, 50 people after 7 o'clock that are walking the trails and the roads? There's not gonna be a lot of people being impacted by anything, so I guess I wouldn't restrict it. I wouldn't tie the weekday events to the weekend events.
Okay, what would you say? Well, I think we nailed down the weekend, right? 100 max for one day, and it could be various numbers of groups as long as it's not more than 100 people on the island at one time. Is that a correct summary?
Yeah, I think the 100 in a day makes sense.
Okay, so during the week, do we want to look at that a little differently? One day out of the week or 2 days out of the week, we allow 100 person? Come on, you guys.
That's after 4 o'clock.
Yeah. If somebody sends a request in to us and they want to have
A 40-person barbecue.
a 40 person, well, we don't have fire, but a 40 person picnic on a Tuesday, are we saying yes? Is that our recommendation to the Board of Selectmen?
Well, I'd certainly say yes to that. The question is, do we allow that 5 days a week, 40 people having a picnic on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday?
Right?
I mean, if we want to have restrictions, I mean, I can't imagine that's going to happen very much, but
I think we probably want to not do that. I mean, we have beaches for that are built for that. You know, I think I don't think we want to over program this place. I think events at Great Island should be fairly special, and that we just don't know, you know, if it ends up that there's a special event like an anniversary party or a wedding or something, and they happen to fall in May and September or October, then I think we want to find a way to support that, to make these families that are trying to do these, you know, milestone events, make it work for them. But at the same time, I don't think that we should be rolling out the red carpet and encouraging our residents to come have lots of events on Great Island. I think walk it, we talked about passive recreation. If, you know, to think that you're going to bring your cornhole game and a big barbecue down there when people are trying to walk and have it be, you know, more pristine, I think we would be, I think we'll regret it if we do that. I think we should go slow and encourage people to use the places that we already have for those types of events of 40 people getting together for a picnic.
Bruce, I'm glad to hear you say that, because when we were talking about 100, I was thinking that was for a weekend. And then when we started talking about weeknights, I'm thinking, well, let's just make that for the week. Not to say the 100's the right number, but on a cumulative basis, to me, 100, 150 on a weekly basis provides flexibility, unless you have one gorilla come in and try to do a 140 person event. So I was thinking that provided flexibility and allowed us to gradually move into this. But
I agree. So are we at 100 for the week?
I'd say 150 for the week, and that will still allow you to have that 60 person light use for a thing, and there's still subjectivity to that. So if we see a 100 person heavy duty event, then you could still have somebody do something. But I think we want to keep it as however we roll it out. I think we try to say that it's more special events than it is. I mean, like, for example, the fireman's picnic and the policeman's picnic, those are once a year. They're annual events for our first responders. We want to allow that. That's a nice thing to have. A wedding, something like that, that's a special event. That's, and then, but I don't think anyway, I'm repeating myself, as far as like your Friday night barbecue, I don't know.
But I hear you, Bruce, but I'm not gonna be the one that wants to tell somebody your event isn't special enough for Great Island.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I hear you.
So is
Well,
the proposal
I agree with Bruce
150
that-
per week, irrespective of when?
There can also be fees associated that will make it so that people don't want
Yeah.
to
And the shuttle's gonna
use
be
it
prohibitive.
too often,
And the shuttle's gonna be prohibitive as well.
Shuttle will be prohibitive, very expensive.
Yeah, so, it's gonna have to be special for folks to wanna do all that.
Yeah, I'm not sure we'll have a lot of people that, 20 person that want to get a shuttle and go out there. So, backing up into Jeff's question, is it 150 for the week regardless of, and 150 for the week and no more than 100 at one time?
I'm thinking that I'm going on Bruce's comment that I'm tending to agree with, which is maybe we just restricted the events to weekends, leave the weeks free alone. People can have their 15-person family picnic without doing an event thing if they want, and during the week. But no scheduled large events during the 5-day week. They all have to occur on the weekend, whether that's 100 or 150. It's got to occur on those 2 days.
Okay, then I would say we should have one day of the weekend that's free.
Okay.
I don't think booking the whole weekend for events is. I would support one day on the weekend, 100 people max.
Which could be 2 events or 3 events, you're saying?
Yes,
Gotcha.
and no events during the week.
I'm in favor of that. I'm in favor of more restrictive during this trial phase while there's construction going on.
I can agree with that.
Yeah, this is guidelines during for the near term.
Okay,
And we'll
so
look a lot.
okay, so 100 people one day of the weekend, nothing during the week, and this is all subject to our EMT people approving. That's to dawn. Okay, and they need to shuttle in.
Yeah, I'd only say dawn to dusk as opposed to dusk to dawn.
Okay, you're right.
Or as somebody last week said, dusk to twilight.
I heard that.
I was like,
Okay, and for these events that we're talking about right now, these near-term events, no amplified announcements or music or anything like that? Do we agree?
I don't think that necessarily has to be a rule. I just think it has to stay under the town ordinance, which is we have sound laws already. So if
Well, we follow the state rules.
the state rules, sorry, but yeah, I mean, if the Boy Scouts are doing something and they have, I don't know, some music on, as long as it's or amplified sound. I mean, does that even say that, like, if you've got a speaker talking about nature or something, that they can't be wearing a
mic? Yeah.
mic? I mean, we had mics on Reed Hildebrand people when we were doing our tours. So amplified sound includes everything, includes PA, and it includes music. I don't know that we should be overly tight on that yet. I think we should We don't do that at the, I know we do like the kids DAF media picnic at the beach, and we have a little speaker on and it's not loud, but it would kind of be a bummer to have a rule that said you couldn't have some background music.
Jeff, what is the rule for Park and Rec? I know Highland, it's no amplified.
It says for Highland, and I think I'm not sure. I've got too many spreadsheets up. I think Highland permits the amplified sound in their major events, but not what they call programmed activities.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, they have, Park and Rec has no person shall make unreasonable noise in any park so as to cause public inconvenience, annoyance, or harm. Use of a speaker, amplifier, or microphone is limited to group events approved by the department.
Yep, there's that subjectivity again. We need that here,
Yeah, I agree with that.
right? Amplified music for a small wedding is different than amplified speaking to a group on a nature walk.
In general, going back to what I said, I think we hope that there's not going to be too many events, and we want this place to be special and different than other places that we have in town. So I think that we definitely don't want loud music, but to redline it out completely, is it just unreasonable? Are we just being do we have our heads in the sand on that? So I think we're going to learn a lot. I think we're going to learn a lot based on these first things. Like as you're walking by, are you hearing amplified sound? We could start with saying no, and
Yeah, that might be the safer path.
Yeah, I think also, if we're going to have more than one event at a time, I think if we did allow, that could get a little confusing and noisy. So I think I would go with, at this point, no amplified sound. Doesn't mean that we can't change it going.
without the approval of the approving body, whoever that body is. But that's what Parks and Rec says, right? Because I mean, to think that there's not going to be amplified sound when we have a wedding or something like that, that's a non-starter, right? I mean, there's going to be amplified sound at a wedding. So are we talking about these 100 or less events?
Yeah.
Is that
Yes.
what we're saying?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
like the big events are like someone just said, they're a different bird, right?
Yeah, they're a different bird. And I think let's focus on events that we're going to have, that we're going to okay for between now and when 23A is completed. So let's say events between now and April 1st.
I'm fine with the no amplified sound. Everything that we've described that we've received thus far, just to me seems like, a guided bird walk is probably going to be pretty hushed tones, and the tour. I know we use some mics. Maybe that could be looked at, but I think it is almost easier to start with no than to start with yes, and then somebody has a different vision of what appropriate amplification for a tour guide ought to be, and then we've got a complaint.
Okay.
Agree. I agree.
You agree?
I agree.
Yep.
Dan?
Yeah, I can live with that.
Okay. Okay, so no amp right now. Okay. All right, deposit or fee structure, this one I touched on with John, and I think this is a conversation we should wait. This is really more town oriented, and I think hearing his thoughts firsthand would be good. On the alcohol policy, if everybody had a chance to take a look at it, I think the Park and Rec's alcohol policy is pretty clear and covers just about everything. So at this point, I would follow their guidelines unless somebody has something specific they would like to see changed. Okay. Everybody agree with following Park and Rec's policy for alcohol? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so we kind of pivoted, and I think this is a good idea, to just focusing on this from now until April 1st. So locations on the island, are there any places that we want to steer people towards for these special events? For instance, the courtyard, somebody mentioned, or maybe the main house lawn or the pink house lawn or the polo field. Do those all sound like reasonable locations?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
the
just
the question might be, do we want to restrict anything? Certainly inside any buildings is restricted. Do we want to restrict the beach?
I don't think so. I think that's going to be a really good lessons learned.
Yeah, that's a good question. From a safety perspective, let me just look into if that's a possibility or not.
But going back to this again, we just all said we'll follow the Parks and Rec rules on alcohol, which seems to make good sense. But I'm now trying to just think through this. Like, so if we're going to have an event on the polo field or on the front or back, I can't remember what, like, I can never figure out whether it's the front or the backyard of the main house, but let's say the yard,
Water
the big
side.
yard,
The water side.
the water side of the main house, right? If somebody's actually going to rent this thing out, have a caterer come in, and there's going to be alcohol served with a bar, and we're saying no amplified sound. I mean, even if they have an acoustic guitar player, they typically have an amp that is, it's not drums and crazy band, but it's still amplified sound. And you may have a speaker, and so I don't know about that. I think we should not necessarily redline amplified sound. I think I'm more happy about keeping the number of events to a bare minimum, which I think we just did by saying no weekdays and 100 per weekend. But if there's at that event, I think if we're going to try to get a true flavor for how people want to use the island and what works and what doesn't work, I think that if you're going to have an event where there's like going to be some cocktails served and things like that, it would be a poor expectation of us to say that there's zero music. And I know someone could say, Bruce, that's not zero music. That just means it can't be amplified. That means, okay, you could have a piano player, right? But how are you going to get a piano in there? I mean, you're going to get a piano that's like a modern piano, and it hooks up to an amplifier. But that's going to be outlawed because there's no amplified sound allowed.
Right. I hear you, Bruce, but I also, I go back to, we could have a number of events. We could have five events, right, with 20 people each. So then we have 5 different amplified sounds going on. I'm just going with the extreme. And also it's an island. So the amplified sound doesn't just impact the people that are actually walking around on the island that aren't part of that event. They'll be hearing.
Yeah.
But it's
all right, well, we're not making any decisions tonight anyway, so let's just everybody noodle on that, and just remember that we got to have policies that actually make sense for people. So, and
It's a good.
we'll have the opportunity to figure it out.
Okay. All right. I think we covered everything that we had discussed. And I think Jeff and I will try to put this together in some kind of format that what we've kind of come to an agreement on, the 6 of us or the 7 of us with Lori. The other items to consider, I think, are all relatively straightforward. Of course, we'll look at environmental areas and keeping out of any of those. We'll look at flexibility as far as rain date goes, insurance requirements, signage, all of that kind of stuff. So we have a little bit more to cover at the July 9th, but we got a lot of heavy lifting done. So any more thoughts from anybody on this?
Monica, I got one, which is we still need to decide what to do with requests that are going to occur in 2026, because we can't wait till 23A is done before we start addressing those. So I'm not saying we need to decide that tonight, but if you get a request for 2026, what do we do with it?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Right now, we just say that we're working on a policy guideline, but I'd love to be able to offer something a little bit more definitive, for sure. But we need to make these decisions. So, you know what, we did a lot. It's late. I really appreciate you guys. I know we have another meeting next week. We had a meeting last week. It's a lot of meetings. And this is a difficult thing to work through. So I appreciate everybody's patience. Jeff and I will try to get together and get what we've accomplished or what we've kind of agreed upon so far. And then I hope that if we have time with Reed, we'll try to get Reed Hildebrand, we'll try to get some feedback from them next week. Not sure we'll have time for this, but if not, this group will meet again mid-July, probably July 9th. I have penciled in. I just want to make sure that please look at your calendars. Let me know if that works for you at 6:30 and as soon as possible. Okay. So I can schedule that one. Okay. Anything else from anybody? Okay. Nothing. All right. Then I will call for a motion to adjourn.
Logo merchandise update is
Oh, I
also
forgot.
on the agenda.
You know what? You fell off the screen and
I'm here, but
I wasn't looking at my agenda. Sorry. Yes, what do you have for us on logo?
yeah, just that I think the samples were shown at the last meeting, if I'm not mistaken. But there's some questions around the design not matching the website. I spoke with the provider. They said the ones that are shipped will match the website exactly. We've reconciled any issues there. It's more of the straight letters versus or any rounded type format. And I think there might have been one of the long sleeve prints on one of the short sleeve shirts, but the website is what we should go by for what will actually be printed.
Okay. Is it live now, Kip?
It is not live to order. It's up for our viewing. We would need to send them approval of what's there, and then he can activate it pretty quickly.
So what do you want from us? You want us to pick a certain number of items?
Well, I think the website does a pretty good job of narrowing down with the current selection, and then we'll see how those items sell, and then look to add more if we feel the need. But I guess the ask would be just to approve what's on there currently, and then to approve activating that site for ordering.
Okay. So you know what, everybody take a look at that and I think that's a pretty easy. So I'm gonna add this to the agenda for next week. So please take a look at it between now and then. Okay, that's your only ask, right, Kip?
Yes. I think we just need to figure out where any money is sent to from the sales. So maybe that's you and I can work on that offline.
Sure. Okay. So it's approving the items that are currently on the website.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Any other questions for Kip on this? Nope, seeing none. Okay, any other thoughts, you guys? Okay, thank you for your time. And can I have a motion to adjourn? Bruce moves, Dan seconds. Okay, all in favor?
I-
Terrific.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thanks, everyone.
night.
Dan, Bruce, thanks for running this. Really appreciate
You're
it.
welcome. My pleasure.
Okay.
Good night.